You know that feeling when someone humiliates you in front of your entire family, when they tear apart something you worked hard on, only to discover they've made the biggest mistake of their life? Well, let me tell you about the Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything in my family. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how my sister-in-law Vivienne learned the hardest lesson of her life, and how karma served her the most delicious slice of humble pie she never saw coming. The perfect family, or so it seemed. It was November 2023, and I had been married to my husband, Robert, for 7 wonderful years. We lived in a comfortable home in Charleston, South Carolina, and life was good. Robert worked as an architect, and I was a freelance graphic designer who worked from home. We had 2 beautiful children, Emma, age 5, and little Thomas, who had just turned 3. Robert's family was what you'd call traditional Southern. His mother, Dorothy, was a sweet woman who welcomed me with open arms when Robert and I first started dating back in 2015. His father, George, was a retired banker with a gentle sense of humor. And then there was Vivienne. Vivienne had married Robert's younger brother, Christopher, about 3 years ago. She was 32, blonde, perfectly polished, and always dressed like she was about to attend a charity gala. She worked as a real estate agent for luxury properties and never let anyone forget it. From the moment I met her at their engagement party in June 2020, I could sense the subtle competition she wanted to create between us. At first it was small things. She'd comment on my outfit choices. "Oh, Margaret, you're so brave to wear flats to a dinner party." Or she'd mention how she only shopped at boutique stores because department store clothes just don't have that special something. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just insecure or trying to fit into the family in her own way. But over the years, Vivienne's comments became sharper, more pointed. She'd compare our children, our homes, our careers. When Robert and I bought our house in 2021, she made sure to mention that she and Christopher were looking at properties in a much more exclusive neighborhood. When I showed everyone the logo I'd designed for a local bakery, she smiled sweetly and said, "That's so cute, like something you'd see on a college project." Robert noticed it too, but he was caught in the middle. "She's family now," he'd say. "We just have to keep the peace." The Thanksgiving invitation. In early November 2023, Dorothy called me with an idea. "Margaret, honey, George and I were thinking, why don't we have Thanksgiving at your place this year? Your home is so warm and spacious, and the children would love playing in your backyard." I was thrilled. I loved hosting, and I immediately started planning the menu. Robert and I decided to make it special, a traditional Southern Thanksgiving with all the trimmings. Turkey, cornbread dressing, collard greens, sweet potato casserole, mac and cheese, cranberry sauce, rolls, and 3 different pies for dessert. There was just one problem: I'm not a great cook. Don't get me wrong, I can follow a recipe and make decent everyday meals for my family, but preparing a Thanksgiving feast for 10 people, that was beyond my skill level. Robert knew it too. We'd hosted a small Easter brunch the year before, and while the food was edible, it wasn't anything to write home about. What if we get it catered? Robert suggested one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by recipe printouts. "Your mother would know immediately," I said, shaking my head. "You know how she is about home-cooked meals, and Vivienne would never let me live it down." Robert sighed. "You're right, she'd probably announce it to everyone before we even sat down to eat." That's when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Enter Chef Isabella. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was at my favorite coffee shop, the Magnolia Bean, working on a design project. I'd been going there for years. It was quiet, had the best caramel lattes in Charleston, and the owner, Mrs. Patterson, always had a kind word for everyone. That morning, I noticed a new face behind the counter. A woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, strong hands that moved with practiced efficiency, and warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "You must be new here," I said when I went to order my usual. "Just started last week," she replied with a slight accent I couldn't quite place, maybe Italian or Spanish. "I'm Isabella. Mrs. Patterson is my cousin. She convinced me to help out after I retired." "Retired from what?" I asked, making conversation. Her smile widened. "I was a chef, worked in restaurant kitchens for 35 years, started as a line cook in New York City in 1988, worked my way up to head chef at several fine dining establishments. My last position was at Marcello's in downtown Charleston. Maybe you've heard of it." My jaw dropped. Marcello's was one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. It had been featured in Southern Living magazine 3 times. People made reservations months in advance. You were the head chef at Marcello's. That's incredible. Isabella shrugged modestly. It was a good run, but after 35 years of 12-hour days and high-pressure kitchens, I was ready for something quieter. My cousin offered me some hours here, and I get to make coffee and pastries without all the stress. We talked for a while, and I found myself confiding in her about my Thanksgiving dilemma. I don't know why. Maybe it was her kind face or the fact that she was a stranger who wouldn't judge me. But I told her everything, about Vivienne's constant criticisms, about wanting to prove myself, about being terrified I'd ruin Thanksgiving dinner. Isabella listened carefully, stirring her own cup of coffee. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "What if I helped you?" "Helped me?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I'll cook your Thanksgiving dinner," she said simply. "The whole thing. You tell me what you want and I'll prepare it in your kitchen the day before. Traditional Southern Thanksgiving, restaurant quality, but it'll look like home cooking. No one will ever know." I couldn't possibly. I started, but she held up her hand. "Margaret, I've spent 35 years cooking for critics, for food bloggers, for people who sent dishes back because the garnish wasn't perfectly placed. Do you know what I haven't done much of? Cook for someone who genuinely needs help and would appreciate it. Let me do this. Consider it my retirement gift to myself, one last beautiful meal without the pressure." I was overwhelmed. "I'd pay you, of course." "Just cover the ingredients," Isabella said firmly. "The labor is my pleasure, besides. I'm curious to see what happens with this sister-in-law of yours." And that's how Isabella came into my life. The secret preparation. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Isabella arrived at my house at 8 a.m. with bags of groceries and her own set of professional knives. Robert had taken the kids to his parents' house for the day, so we had the kitchen to ourselves. "First rule," Isabella said as she unpacked ingredients. "We make everything from scratch, but we make it look homemade. No perfect restaurant plating. This needs to look like a home cook made it with love." I watched in awe as she moved through my kitchen like a dancer. Her hands were constantly in motion, chopping, stirring, seasoning, tasting. She talked as she worked, sharing stories from her years in kitchens. "The turkey needs to brine for 24 hours, she explained as she prepared a mixture of salt, sugar, herbs and spices. "That's the secret to moisture. Then we'll do a herb butter under the skin, thyme, sage, rosemary, garlic, traditional but elevated." She made her cornbread dressing with homemade cornbread, toasted to perfection, then mixed with celery, onions and herbs. "The key is the chicken stock," she said. "Always use high-quality stock." The collard greens were cooked low and slow with smoked turkey wings, apple cider vinegar, and a touch of brown sugar. "Southern classics done right," Isabella smiled. Her sweet potato casserole wasn't the overly sweet version I'd seen at potlucks. Instead, she roasted the sweet potatoes first, then mashed them with butter, cream, and warm spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, just a hint of maple syrup. The topping was a delicate pecan streusel. The mac and cheese was a revelation. 3 cheeses, Isabella said. Sharp cheddar for flavor, Gruyere for complexity, and a touch of cream cheese for silkiness. And we'll make a proper bechamel sauce, no shortcuts. By the time she left that evening, my refrigerator was packed with prepared dishes, each labeled with reheating instructions. The turkey was brining in a cooler. My kitchen smelled like heaven. "Tomorrow, you'll put everything in the oven according to my timeline," Isabella said, handing me a detailed schedule. "It'll look like you've been cooking all day. Just follow the instructions and don't worry." "Isabella, I don't know how to thank you," I said, my eyes getting misty. She patted my hand. "Thank me by standing tall when that sister-in-law tries to criticize you. And remember, confidence is the best seasoning." Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving morning arrived with clear blue skies and perfect weather. I woke up at 6 a.m. and followed Isabella's timeline exactly. Turkey in the oven at 6:30. Side dishes began their reheating schedule at different times, the house filled with the most incredible aromas. Robert came into the kitchen around 8 a.m., following his nose. "Oh my God, Margaret, it smells like Marcello's in here." I smiled mysteriously. "I've been working hard." "I never doubted you," he said, kissing my forehead, but I could see the surprise in his eyes. He'd expected our usual decent but unremarkable meal. This was something different. The family started arriving at 2 p.m. Dorothy and George came first, bearing a store-bought pecan pie. Just a backup, dear, in case you needed extra dessert. Then came Robert's sister, Amanda, with her husband, Marcus, and their teenage daughter, Sophie. And finally, at 2:30 p.m., Vivienne and Christopher arrived. Vivienne swept into my home wearing a cream-colored designer dress and heels that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, her makeup flawless. She carried a crystal dish with what looked like a gourmet appetizer. Margaret, she kissed both my cheeks. I brought my famous prosciutto-wrapped figs with goat cheese and balsamic reduction. I thought we'd need something sophisticated to start with. That's lovely, Vivienne, thank you, I said evenly. She glanced around my house and I could see her cataloguing everything, the decorations, the table settings, the flowers. Oh, how festive, very homey. Christopher shot me an apologetic look. He was actually a sweet guy, and I often wondered how he ended up with Vivienne. As everyone gathered in the living room for pre-dinner drinks, I excused myself to check on the food. Everything was on schedule. The turkey was resting, golden brown and perfect. The sides were warming. I'd even followed Isabella's instructions for making her homemade gravy from the turkey drippings. At 3 p.m., I announced that dinner was ready. The dining room table looked beautiful. I'd used my grandmother's china and crystal glasses. Fall flowers served as the centerpiece. The food was arranged on serving platters, nothing too fancy, just good home-style presentation exactly as Isabella had instructed. And oh, the food looked glorious. The turkey was perfectly golden, herbs visible under the crispy skin. The dressing was golden brown and fragrant. The collard greens glistened. The sweet potato casserole had that beautiful caramelized top. The mac and cheese was bubbling and golden. Fresh rolls sat in a basket lined with a red cloth napkin. Everyone took their seats and Robert began carving the turkey. As plates were passed around and everyone began serving themselves, I watched their faces. I saw Dorothy's eyes widen. George took a bite of dressing and paused mid-chew, looking surprised. Amanda actually said, "Oh wow," out loud when she tasted the mac and cheese. And then there was Vivienne. She had taken small portions of everything, almost suspiciously small. She cut a tiny piece of turkey, took a bite, and I saw her freeze. Her expression was unreadable. She tried the dressing next, then the collard greens, then the sweet potato casserole. "So Margaret," Vivienne said, her voice loud enough to cut through the table conversation. "This is all quite ambitious. Did you really make all of this yourself?" The table went quiet. "I did," I said calmly, taking a sip of my wine. "It's just that," Vivienne laughed, a high tinkling sound. "Well, no offense, honey, but we all remember your Easter brunch last year. The quiche that was still runny in the middle, the potatoes that were burned on the outside and raw on the inside." I felt Robert tense beside me, but I kept my face neutral. "And this," Vivienne gestured at her plate, "this is just, I mean, you can't honestly expect us to believe you suddenly learned to cook like this. This turkey is actually quite good, surprisingly good. The dressing is almost restaurant quality. Are you sure you didn't have help? Maybe a little catering company involvement?" "Vivienne," Christopher said quietly, warning in his voice. But she was on a roll now, emboldened by what she clearly thought was catching me in a lie. "I'm not trying to be mean," she continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I just think it's important to be honest with family. There's no shame in getting help, Margaret. Not everyone is domestic. Some of us have the gift and some of us..." She trailed off with a shrug. Dorothy looked uncomfortable. "Vivienne, dear, the food is wonderful. Let's just enjoy." "No, I want Margaret to be honest," Vivienne insisted. "Because if she did cook this, then I'll be genuinely impressed. But if she didn't, and she's letting us all praise her for someone else's work, well, that's just dishonest, isn't it?" The table was dead silent now. Emma and Thomas had stopped eating, sensing the tension. I saw Robert's hand clench around his fork. This was the moment. This was what Vivienne did. She pushed and pushed until she humiliated someone, until she proved she was superior. I'd watched her do it to others, and now it was my turn. I could have gotten angry, I could have defended myself, but instead I heard Isabella's voice in my head. "Confidence is the best seasoning." "You're absolutely right, Vivienne," I said calmly. Her eyes lit up with triumph. "I knew it, so you did have it catered." I had help, I continued, cutting her off, from someone much more skilled than me, someone who really knows what they're doing in a kitchen. Robert looked at me, confused. Dorothy's face fell. Vivienne sat back in her chair, arms crossed, vindication written all over her face. Well, at least you're honest. See, everyone, I told you. Margaret, there's really no shame in admitting you can't cook. Not everyone has domestic talents. Christopher and I were just saying how some women are naturally gifted in the kitchen and others. She waved her hand dismissively. You're right again, I said, and I saw confusion flicker across her face. So let me properly introduce you to the person who did cook this meal. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Every eye at the table followed me. I opened the back door, where Isabella had been waiting, exactly as we'd planned that morning when she called to check on the reheating schedule. Isabella walked into the dining room, still in her chef's jacket from her morning shift at the coffee shop. Her name was embroidered on the pocket, Chef Isabella Romano Marcello's. The effect was instantaneous. Dorothy gasped, George sat up straighter, Amanda's eyes went wide, and Vivienne went absolutely pale. Everyone, I said, my voice sweet as honey, this is Isabella Romano. She's a retired chef who worked at Marcello's for the last 12 years. Before that, she worked at Le Bernardin in New York, Chez Henry in Boston, and several other fine dining establishments. She has 35 years of professional culinary experience. And yes, she cooked your Thanksgiving dinner. Isabella smiled graciously at the table. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the meal. Marcello's, Dorothy breathed. The Marcello's, Margaret, how did you? We met at a coffee shop, I explained. Isabella and I became friends, and when I told her about my Thanksgiving worries, she very generously offered to help me prepare the meal. As a gift. The turkey, George said slowly. Was this your orange herb roasted turkey, the one that was in Southern Living? Isabella nodded. A variation, yes, I adapted it for home cooking. But I wasn't looking at them, I was looking at Vivienne. Her face had gone from pale to red. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish. She'd spent the last 10 minutes insulting the meal, insulting me, implying I was dishonest and incompetent. And she'd just humiliated herself in front of everyone by insulting a dish created by one of the most respected chefs in Charleston. Vivienne, I said, my voice kind but firm, you were right that I couldn't have made this meal alone. I don't have the skills, but I was smart enough to know that and fortunate enough to have Isabella's friendship and help. Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is ask for help from people who know better than we do, don't you think? The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone. Vivienne's mouth worked soundlessly. Christopher had his head in his hands. Amanda was trying very hard not to smile. Vivienne started, then stopped. I mean. It's quite all right, Isabella said graciously. Margaret told me you worked in real estate. That's a field where presentation and attention to detail matter very much, quite like cooking. I'm sure you understand the importance of not making assumptions before you have all the facts. It was the gentlest cutting down I'd ever witnessed. Isabella had essentially called Vivienne out for being presumptuous and rude without raising her voice or saying anything directly insulting. I should go, Isabella said. I just wanted to stop by and make sure everything was perfect. Margaret, you followed my instructions beautifully. The timing on everything is excellent. Please stay for dessert, Dorothy said immediately. We'd be honored. And so Isabella stayed. She sat in Vivienne's usual seat at the important end of the table. Vivienne had quietly moved to a chair near the middle, and she regaled us with stories from her years in restaurant kitchens. Dorothy hung on her every word. George asked about cooking techniques. Even the kids were fascinated. Vivienne was silent for the rest of the meal. The aftermath. After dinner, as people were having coffee and pie, Isabella's pies, of course, a traditional pumpkin, a bourbon pecan, and an apple crumble that made everyone groan with pleasure, Christopher pulled Vivienne aside. Through the kitchen door, I could hear their hushed but intense conversation. That was unacceptable, Christopher was saying. You humiliated yourself, and you tried to humiliate Margaret on Thanksgiving. I didn't know, Vivienne started. That's the point, Christopher's voice rose slightly. You never know, you just assume the worst about Margaret, about everyone who isn't in your little circle. I'm tired of it, Vive, I'm really tired of it. When they came back, Vivienne approached me in the kitchen. Her face was splotchy, her eyes red. I wondered if she'd been crying. Margaret, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. What I said at dinner was inappropriate and unkind. I don't have an excuse, I'm sorry. I studied her for a moment. The apology seemed genuine, if forced. I accept your apology, Vivienne, thank you. I also, she swallowed hard, I need to apologize for how I've treated you over the years. The comments, the comparisons, it was wrong. I think I felt threatened by you, by how comfortable you are in your own skin, how you don't seem to need to prove anything to anyone. And I took it out on you by trying to make you feel small. Now that surprised me. I hadn't expected that level of self-awareness. I appreciate you saying that, I said. It takes courage to admit when we've been wrong. Friends, she asked tentatively, holding out her hand. I shook it. Let's start with family and see where it goes. She nodded, looking relieved. The new chapter. As everyone was leaving that evening, Isabella pulled me aside. You handled that beautifully, she said. I learned from watching a master, I replied. The way you addressed her without being cruel, that was perfect. Isabella smiled. One of the things you learn in professional kitchens is that dignity doesn't require cruelty. You can stand up for yourself and correct someone's behavior without tearing them down. That's a skill that serves you far beyond the kitchen. I hope we can stay friends, I said. I mean, beyond you rescuing me from Thanksgiving disasters. I'd like that, Isabella said warmly. And Margaret, you didn't need rescuing, you needed support, there's a difference. You were clever enough to recognize a challenge you couldn't handle alone, wise enough to ask for help and brave enough to face your critic head-on. Those are the qualities of a very strong woman. After everyone left and the kids were in bed, Robert and I cleaned up the kitchen together. He was unusually quiet. Are you upset that I didn't tell you about Isabella? I finally asked. He stopped scrubbing a pan and turned to me. Are you kidding? I'm amazed. Margaret, you were magnificent tonight. The way you handled Vivienne, I've wanted to stand up to her for years, but I never could without causing a family rift. You did it perfectly. You didn't attack her, you just let her attack herself with her own assumptions. I learned something today, I said, leaning against the counter. For years, I let Vivienne make me feel inadequate. I let her little comments chip away at my confidence. But Isabella taught me that there's no shame in asking for help, no weakness in admitting what you don't know. The weakness is in pretending, in tearing others down to lift yourself up. Robert hugged me. I'm sorry I told you to just keep the peace. You deserve to be defended and I should have done it. You defended me by believing in me, I said. That mattered. Christmas and beyond. Christmas 2023 was different. Vivienne invited us all to her and Christopher's house, and to everyone's surprise, she hired a catering company. I'm not a cook, she announced to the family with a laugh, and I'm done pretending I am. Margaret taught me that there's no shame in bringing in professionals when you need them. She and I weren't best friends, but we'd reached a peaceful coexistence. She still made the occasional tone-deaf comment, but when she did, I saw Christopher raise an eyebrow and she'd catch herself. Sorry, that came out wrong, she'd say, and I could tell she meant it. Isabella became a regular fixture in my life. We met for coffee every week, and she started teaching me actual cooking skills, not to make me a chef, but to make me more confident in my own kitchen. She was patient and encouraging, never making me feel stupid for not knowing something. Cooking is just science and practice, she'd say. Anyone can learn if they want to. By Easter 2024, I made the brunch entirely by myself. It wasn't restaurant quality, but it was good, genuinely good. And when Vivienne complimented the quiche, I knew she meant it. The real lesson that Thanksgiving taught me something important, something I want to share with anyone who's ever felt inadequate or looked down upon. Your worth isn't determined by what you can do alone. It's determined by your character, your choices, and how you treat others. Vivienne spent years trying to prove she was better than me, better dressed, better connected, better at domestic tasks. But what she really proved was that she was insecure, and that insecurity made her cruel. I could have responded with cruelty of my own when she attacked me at dinner. I could have humiliated her, made her feel as small as she'd made me feel over the years. But Isabella showed me a better way. Stand up for yourself, correct the behavior, but leave the person's dignity intact. Because here's the thing, Vivienne wasn't a monster. She was a woman with her own insecurities, her own fears about not measuring up. She'd chosen to deal with those fears by putting others down. It wasn't right, but understanding it made it easier to forgive. 1 year later, Thanksgiving 2024 was hosted by Amanda. It was a potluck with everyone contributing something. I made my Isabella improved green bean casserole and sweet potato pie. Vivienne brought store-bought rolls and a charcuterie board, and she was upfront about it. "I picked these up at that new gourmet deli," she announced cheerfully. "The one Margaret recommended. I thought, why reinvent the wheel when professionals do it better?" We all laughed. Dorothy gave me a knowing smile. After dinner, Vivienne and I ended up in the kitchen together, washing dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room. "Can I tell you something?" Vivienne said quietly, her hands in sudsy water. "That Thanksgiving, the one where you brought Isabella, it was the best thing that ever happened to me." I looked at her in surprise. "I was miserable," she continued. "I was constantly comparing myself to everyone, trying to prove I was good enough. I don't even know who I was trying to impress. My parents, Christopher's family, myself." She shook her head. "But when you brought Isabella in, when you were so confident about asking for help, it gave me permission to stop pretending." "I'm glad," I said, "and I meant it. I'm seeing a therapist now," she added, "working on my insecurity issues, my need for external validation. It's helping." "That takes courage," I told her. She smiled. "I learned from watching you last Thanksgiving. You had the courage to be vulnerable, to admit you needed help. That's real strength." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, then she said, "Do you think Isabella would be willing to teach me to cook? Not restaurant-level stuff, just basics. I'd like to learn." "I think she'd love that," I said. "She told me once that teaching someone who genuinely wants to learn is one of her greatest joys." And that's exactly what happened. Isabella started giving Vivienne cooking lessons in early 2025. I joined them sometimes, and it became this unexpected bonding time for the three of us, two women who had been rivals and the chef who had inadvertently brought them together. The end, or the beginning. As I write this in November 2025, I'm preparing for another Thanksgiving. This time, we're all cooking together: Isabella, Vivienne, Amanda, Dorothy, and me. We're doing it at my house again, but instead of one person preparing everything, we're making it a group effort. Isabella will supervise and guide us. Vivienne is making the turkey with Isabella's coaching. Amanda is handling desserts. Dorothy is making her famous cornbread dressing. And I'm doing the side vegetables and my now famous mac and cheese, Isabella's recipe, but I've made it so many times. I've added my own touches. The kids are older now. Emma is 7 and wants to help with baking. Thomas is 5 and mostly just wants to eat cookie dough. Christopher and Robert will handle the cleanup. George will carve the turkey. It's going to be chaotic and noisy and imperfect. And it's going to be wonderful. Because that's what I learned from that fateful Thanksgiving in 2023. Family isn't about perfection. It's not about proving who's better or more talented or more accomplished. It's about showing up for each other, helping each other, forgiving each other, and growing together. Vivienne will probably always be a bit dramatic and occasionally insensitive. I'll probably always be a bit too sensitive and overthinking. But we've learned to work with those flaws, to call each other out gently when needed, and to celebrate each other's successes. And Isabella, she's become the grandmother figure our family never knew we needed. She teaches, she guides, she shares her wisdom, not just about cooking, but about life, dignity, and grace. That Thanksgiving dinner that Vivienne mocked turned out to be the catalyst for healing in our family. Her cruelty led to self-reflection. My vulnerability led to connection. And Isabella's kindness showed us all what it means to lift others up instead of tearing them down. So if you're reading this and you've ever felt inadequate, ever felt mocked or belittled or made to feel small, remember this: your worth isn't in what you can do perfectly. It's in your willingness to try, to grow, to ask for help when you need it, and to stand up for yourself with dignity and grace. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, treating others with kindness, and watching karma do its work while you enjoy a perfectly cooked turkey dinner. Margaret's final thoughts: this Thanksgiving I'm grateful for many things: my wonderful family, my patient husband, my beautiful children, and yes, even for Vivienne. Because without that confrontation, without her pushing me to my breaking point, I might never have found the strength to stand up for myself, and I might never have met Isabella, who became so much more than a chef who saved my Thanksgiving. She became a dear friend and a constant reminder that the most powerful thing we can do is lift each other up. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. May your turkeys be moist, your family be kind, and may you always have the courage to ask for help when you need it.